The galaxy was a vast place, filled with countless civilizations, each one thinking they were the greatest. Among them, the Valkyrie were known as one of the most powerful species. Their ships were massive, their weapons devastating, and their arrogance unmatched. For centuries, the Valkyrie had dominated countless star systems. So when they received word about Earth's pitiful fleet, they laughed. The message came through, clear and mocking, across the galaxy. The Valkyrie leader, General Kresh, addressed the galaxy's observers in a voice dripping with contempt. Humans believe they can stand against us with their pitiful fleet. What a joke. We will wipe them out within hours. Let them watch as their so-called ships are turned to dust. The galaxy held its breath. Everyone was watching Earth, waiting to see if the humans would even survive their first contact with the Valkyrie. After all, the Valkyrie were feared and respected across the galaxy. Who could stand against them? On Earth, the people were nervous but determined. Captain Sarah Thompson, leader of Earth's fleet, watched the broadcast in silence. Her fingers drummed lightly against the control panel as her mind raced. The Valkyrie didn't know it yet, but humanity had learned a lot in the years of isolation they had faced. Earth wasn't going to back down. As the Valkyrie's fleet approached, the tension was unbearable. Sarah had spent years preparing for this moment, making sure Earth's fleet was as ready as possible. The human fleet, though small and seemingly weak compared to the Valkyrie's Armada, was about to prove that appearances could be deceiving. Sarah's fleet consisted of only a handful of ships, none of them massive warships like the Valkyries. But what the Valkyrie didn't know was that Earth had something they didn't expect: resourcefulness. The humans had spent years secretly developing advanced technology, hidden from the galaxy's prying eyes. They had one chance to use it, and Sarah knew this was the moment. "All ships, prepare for battle," Sarah said, her voice steady, though her heart raced with anticipation. She could hear the nervous murmurs from her crew, but she knew they were ready. They had trained for this day, and now it had arrived. The first wave of Valkyrie ships appeared on the horizon of Earth's solar system, massive and intimidating. Their fleet was a sight to behold, sleek, powerful, and carrying enough firepower to destroy entire planets. They were certain of victory, and as they neared, their communications opened once again, sending another mocking message. "We are coming, Earth. Prepare for your extinction," the Valkyrie commander sneered over the comms. Sarah watched the screen with cold determination. The odds were stacked against them, but she had a plan. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips as she thought about how the Valkyrie would react to the unexpected. "Initiate Phase 1, she ordered. Her fleet, consisting of smaller, nimble ships, broke formation and scattered. The Valkyrie, expecting a traditional military strategy, were confused. Earth's ships moved quickly, darting around, not giving the Valkyrie a clear target. The Valkyrie hesitated, unsure of what they were facing. "What are they doing?" General Kresh growled, watching the human ships scatter. "They're running away," one of his officers replied, unsure. "It's a cowardly tactic." Kresh chuckled. "Let them run. It will make it easier to destroy them." But Sarah's plan was far from a simple retreat. Her ships moved swiftly in and out of asteroid fields, using their surroundings to their advantage. It wasn't a show of strength, but rather a demonstration of something the Valkyrie had never anticipated. Humans knew how to survive. They were using their environment to confuse the Valkyrie, who relied on overwhelming force and brute strength. It wasn't long before the Valkyrie fleet began to lose their patience. They had expected an easy fight, but now they were faced with an enemy they couldn't quite pin down. As Earth's ships darted around, taking small, calculated shots, the Valkyrie realized they weren't just dealing with an easy target. These humans weren't going to roll over and die. They were fighting back. "Get them," Kresh barked, his fists clenched in anger. "Destroy every last one of them." But despite the Valkyrie's frustration, Earth's fleet held its ground. Sarah knew the Valkyrie would underestimate them. They would think that the humans were simply trying to delay the inevitable. But in truth, every moment was a moment for humanity to get closer to their secret weapon. As the battle raged on, a message was sent to the human fleet, one Sarah had been waiting for. It was from one of their top engineers, Dr. Laura Collins. "We're ready, Captain. Phase 2 is online." Dr. Collins' voice crackled over the comms. "Good," Sarah replied, her eyes narrowing. "It's time." The humans weren't just running. They had been preparing this entire time. Earth's fleet wasn't the pitiful fleet the Valkyrie thought it was. It had something the Valkyrie would never expect. Something deadly, something they could not predict. As the first wave of Valkyrie ships closed in, Sarah gave the order. "Activate the weapon." The energy from Earth's fleet surged as the hidden weapon began to hum. The Valkyrie ships, unaware of the coming storm, kept pressing forward, thinking they had already won. But as the weapon activated, everything changed. The Valkyrie's smugness turned to shock as the first wave of their ships began to disintegrate before their very eyes. "Impossible," Kresh shouted, unable to comprehend what was happening. The battle had only just begun, but the galaxy was about to witness something that no one had ever expected. Humanity's response to being underestimated would be more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The Valkyrie had mocked humanity's fleet. Now they would pay the price, and Earth's rise had only just begun. The mocking broadcast from the Valkyrie was still echoing in the minds of the galaxy's citizens as Earth's fleet began to mobilize. Captain Sarah Thompson stood in the heart of her command ship, Vigilance, looking out at the distant Valkyrie Armada. The massive ships of the Valkyrie fleet, with their sleek metallic surfaces and countless weapons, loomed like predators in the distance. The humans had no illusions. They were small, they were outgunned, and the Valkyrie had no mercy. Yet Sarah wasn't worried. She had known the situation would be bleak when Earth's fleet was called upon to defend the planet, but she had prepared for this moment her whole life. The humans, despite their small numbers, had one crucial advantage: adaptability. The first few minutes of the battle were exactly what everyone had expected. The Valkyrie launched their attack without hesitation. The human ships, no matter how well armed, were dwarfed in comparison. The Valkyrie's advanced weapons and near-invincible armor tore into the human ships, sending a barrage of laser fire that illuminated the black void of space. Sarah watched the chaos unfold on the command center's massive display screen. Her heart raced as her crew scrambled to react, trying to find their footing in the face of overwhelming odds. The human fleet's ships, smaller and far less powerful than the Valkyries, tried to avoid the devastating fire, darting from one position to another in a desperate attempt to survive. "Captain," Lieutenant Mara, the communications officer, called out urgently. "They're targeting the Pioneer. It won't last much longer." Sarah's eyes flickered to the screen, watching as the Pioneer, one of the few remaining human ships, took another direct hit. The ship's shields flared briefly, then collapsed under the force of the attack. The Pioneer spiraled out of control, sparks flying across its hull as it struggled to stay intact. The loss of the Pioneer would be devastating, but Sarah had no time for panic. She had to act quickly. This was the turning point. "Get the fleet in formation," Sarah barked. "Move into defensive positions. Focus on keeping the shields up. We can't afford to lose any more ships." The crew scrambled, quickly coordinating their movements. The Earth fleet, though outnumbered and outgunned, began to spread out in a scattered formation, utilizing the nearby asteroid field to their advantage. The Valkyrie ships, which were used to facing enemies that couldn't even approach their advanced technology, were confused. The humans weren't fighting in the predictable way they had assumed. They weren't offering themselves up for destruction like they expected. The Earth ships were darting in and out of the asteroid belt, making themselves difficult targets. They weren't making head-on attacks, but instead they were moving like shadows, always in motion, always hard to pin down. The Valkyrie fleet, which had expected an easy victory, was now in disarray. The alien commanders watched from their command ships as their laser cannons fired, but the humans seemed to slip through their targeting systems like ghosts. Every shot they fired missed its mark. Foolish humans, General Kresh sneered, watching his fleet's frustration rise. They think they can evade us forever. But Sarah wasn't just trying to evade. She was buying time. The human fleet was deliberately leading the Valkyrie into the traps she had prepared, all while keeping the enemies occupied. Phase 1 complete, Captain. Dr. Laura Collins' voice crackled over the comms. We're ready for Phase 2. Sarah didn't hesitate. Do it. Activate the weapon. The battlefield was a chaotic storm of flashing lights, blinding explosions, and fragmented communications. Earth's fleet had managed to surprise the Valkyrie, but now the battle was shifting. The initial advantage gained by the human fleet was quickly being worn away by the Valkyrie's sheer size and firepower. The Valkyrie were relentless, regrouping and coming back stronger, pushing Earth's ships to their limits. On the Vigilance, Captain Sarah Thompson gripped the armrests of her chair, watching the status screens with a steady gaze. Her ships were still alive, but the cost was rising. The Pioneer had already been destroyed, and several others were on the brink of collapse. The battle was turning into a desperate struggle for survival. It wasn't just about defeating the Valkyrie anymore. It was about staying alive long enough to strike a decisive blow. Captain. Lieutenant Mara's voice cut through the tense atmosphere. The Valkyrie have regrouped. They're moving in for another strike. We're in their firing range. Hold your ground, Mara. Sarah replied calmly. We've survived this long. We can keep them at bay, keep evasive maneuvers going. She turned to her communications officer, Lieutenant Gomes. Send out a distress signal. We need reinforcements now. There's no time, Captain. If we wait for reinforcements, we'll be wiped out first, Gomes said, his voice trembling slightly. We're on our own. Sarah looked out at the swirling void of space beyond her ship's windows. The Valkyrie were circling, their vast fleet moving like an angry swarm of predatory insects. Their weapons locked onto Earth's remaining ships, their dark, jagged hulls flashing ominously as they prepared for another devastating assault. Sarah's mind raced. Earth's fleet was outnumbered, outgunned, and nearly out of time. The Valkyrie had underestimated humanity, but now they were pushing forward with deadly intent. The hidden weapon, Phase 1, had given them a brief advantage, but it wouldn't hold much longer. The Valkyrie had already adapted, counteracting the electromagnetic pulses with some form of shielding. The clock was ticking. Earth's fleet couldn't last much longer. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the comms. It was Dr. Laura Collins, the scientist who had helped develop the secret weapon that had saved them in the earlier stage of the battle. Captain, we got something. Something big. Laura's voice was urgent but excited. We've completed Phase 2. The secondary weapon is ready. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Is it operational? Can we use it now? It's ready, Laura confirmed, but we'll need a moment to power it up. It's unlike anything the Valkyrie have ever faced. It might be our only shot. Sarah didn't hesitate. Do it. Power it up. Outside, the Valkyrie began their assault. Massive laser beams streaked through the dark expanse of space, impacting Earth's fleet. The Vigilance shuddered under the heavy fire, but it held steady. The human ships, using the asteroid belt as cover, continued their evasive tactics, but their movements were becoming less effective as the Valkyrie adapted their tactics. The battle was starting to feel like a losing fight. But Sarah was determined. She wasn't going to let humanity fall. Not like this. We need to survive long enough to give Lara the time she needs, Sarah muttered, looking around at her crew. She turned to her tactical officer. Gunners, target their command ships. We need to cause chaos in their ranks. Let them know they're not invincible. The crew reacted quickly, firing salvo after salvo of missiles and laser blasts, targeting the Valkyrie command ships. But despite their best efforts, the Valkyrie fleet was too well coordinated, and their shields were too strong. The humans' attacks were barely making a dent. "Captain," Mara said, her voice tight with stress, "if we don't act soon, we're going to lose everything. We're almost at their mercy." Sarah's mind was racing. The Valkyrie were closing in fast, and Earth's fleet was taking heavy damage. Every move they made, every strike they attempted, seemed futile. The Valkyrie were too strong, too overwhelming. For a fleeting moment, Sarah wondered if they could survive. But then, just as the Valkyrie fleet was preparing to launch the final assault, a massive burst of energy erupted from the human ships. The newly activated secondary weapon sent out a surge of concentrated power, a pulse of pure energy, so powerful that it disrupted everything in its path. Sarah's eyes widened as she saw the results on the screens. The Valkyrie ships closest to the energy burst began to flicker, their systems malfunctioning in the wake of the attack. The energy pulse wasn't just a physical weapon. It was a disruptive force, a signal that tore through the very heart of the Valkyrie technology. "Phase 2 is working," Dr. Collins' voice echoed through the comms. "We've disabled their shields. They're vulnerable." The Valkyrie fleet, once an unstoppable force, now retreated in chaos. The pulse of human ingenuity had shattered their confidence and crippled their superiority. As the remaining human ships pursued the damaged fleet, the air in the command room of Vigilance was thick with tension, but also with a hard-earned relief. Sarah Thompson stood tall at the helm, watching the enemy ships scattered across the stars, their retreat now a sign of humanity's resilience. "Don't let them escape," Sarah ordered, her voice a mixture of anger and determination. "We've wounded them. Now we finish it." Her crew worked feverishly, coordinating their remaining firepower to finish off the Valkyrie ships that were retreating in disarray. The Vigilance had taken hits, but the crew kept it together, their unwavering spirit driving them to press on. The energy shields hummed with intensity, reflecting the power of their laser blasts and missiles. The battle, which had seemed so one-sided, had turned decisively in humanity's favor. Yet Sarah knew better than to think it was over. The Valkyrie would not give up easily. They were wounded, yes, but not broken. Meanwhile, General Kresh, aboard his flagship the Valkyr, watched in disbelief as the once mighty fleet crumbled before the determined onslaught of the human ships, his face twisted with frustration. This was not the way it was supposed to happen. The galaxy had all but written off humanity as weak and inferior, but now they had proven otherwise. Kresh slammed his fist against the console, his teeth grinding in rage. "They should have been crushed," he shouted. "How could this be? How did they evolve so quickly?" "We," the Valkyrie officer beside him, fear evident in his voice, interrupted. "General, our shields are failing. We've lost 30% of our fleet. The humans are too strong now, Kresh glared at the officer. "We retreat. Now. We need reinforcements." The orders were issued, and the Valkyrie began their retreat in earnest. Their once immense fleet was now a scattered remnant of its former glory. And as they pulled back, the survivors of Earth's fleet pressed forward, ready to wipe them out completely. Back on Earth's command ship, Sarah's focus was unyielding. "Do not let them escape," she repeated, her voice colder now. "We don't get second chances like this. If we let them regroup, we'll be fighting this war all over again. Take them down." Her voice was unwavering, but even she knew that this moment wasn't a victory yet. The Valkyrie were retreating, yes, but Earth had only taken a single step toward winning a much larger war. The true test would come in the days ahead. The galaxy was watching. They would need to prove that this was not a fluke, that humanity's survival wasn't an accident. The pursuit continued through the empty expanse of space, but as Sarah's fleet closed in on the remaining Valkyrie ships, something unexpected happened. The Valkyrie turned, suddenly and decisively. The last of their armada had regrouped. They were not retreating anymore. They were preparing for a final stand. "Captain, they're charging weapons," Lieutenant Mara said, her voice tight. "It's a trap. They've called for reinforcements. Sarah's mind raced. This was exactly what she had feared. The Valkyrie were not retreating because they were weak. They had regrouped, reorganized, and now they were preparing for one final devastating counterattack. "Bring the fleet in tight," Sarah ordered. "We don't have much time. Get ready to counter their assault." But just as the last remnants of the Valkyrie fleet began to power up their weapons, a massive presence appeared on the sensors. "Captain, there's something else," Mara shouted, pointing at the screen. "It's a new ship, and it's huge." A shadow larger than any of the Valkyrie ships emerged from the edge of the battlefield, almost as if it had been lying in wait. It was a dark, massive vessel, with jagged, angular edges that seemed to defy conventional design. The new ship's signature was unlike anything Earth had encountered before. It was alien, far more advanced than even the Valkyrie fleet. "Is it theirs?" Sarah asked, her heart racing. "Are they bringing in reinforcements?" Mara shook her head. "No, Captain. This is something else. The signature doesn't match any Valkyrie technology." The massive alien warship moved with terrifying precision, aligning itself in the path of the human fleet. It was clear it wasn't here to negotiate. It was here to destroy. "All ships, prepare for battle." Sarah barked, already knowing what was coming. Her fingers danced across the controls, rallying her crew and reconfiguring their strategies on the fly. "We can't let this thing get any closer. Engage it with everything we have." The human fleet, already battered from the previous battle, began to fire everything in their arsenal. Lasers, missiles, and everything they could muster were launched at the new threat. But the alien ship, this new force, seemed to absorb their attacks. Its surface shimmered and shifted, deflecting their weapons with ease. "Nothing is getting through," Lieutenant Gomes said, sounding almost defeated. "It's too strong." But Sarah's resolve hardened. "Keep attacking. We've been through worse. This is humanity's fight, and we're not backing down now." As the battle continued, Sarah knew that this was no ordinary enemy. The new alien ship was a symbol of something larger. The galaxy's true response to humanity's rise. But the humans, despite their limitations, weren't about to be intimidated. "The galaxy thought we were weak," Sarah murmured to herself as she watched the shimmering alien ship block their attacks. "Now they'll see what happens when they push us too far." The battle for humanity's survival was far from over. The Valkyrie were retreating, but something even more dangerous had appeared. Yet, in Sarah's heart, she knew one thing was certain. Humanity had learned how to fight. The next phase would be even harder, but no matter what happened, they would not stop. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving humanity's place in the galaxy, by any means necessary. The storm was just beginning. The battle raged on in the cold emptiness of space. Sarah Thompson stood at the helm of the Vigilance, her face set in a grim mask of determination. Her ship, along with the remaining human fleet, was locked in a desperate struggle against the alien warship that had appeared from nowhere, dwarfing everything they had ever seen. The Valkyrie fleet had been pushed back, but now, a greater, more terrifying enemy had emerged. Humanity's fleet had never faced anything like this before. The alien ship shimmered in the darkness, its surface shifting and warping as it absorbed every attack. Each missile, each laser fired by the human fleet had no effect, bouncing off its strange, impenetrable shields. It was as though the ship was mocking them, daring them to continue. "Captain, their shields are holding strong," Lieutenant Mara reported, her voice tense. "We're not making a dent." Sarah glanced at the display, watching as their weapons collided with the alien ship's defenses. The blasts dissipated like rain hitting a steel wall. The alien vessel was an unstoppable force, and Earth's ships were powerless to break through. A quiet tension filled the bridge as Sarah thought quickly. They couldn't keep wasting their resources on attacks that weren't working. The enemy was too strong, and if they didn't find a way to break through soon, humanity would be finished. But then a thought flashed through her mind. Humanity had faced impossible odds before, and they had always found a way to overcome. They weren't going to go down easily. "Commander," Sarah said, turning to Lieutenant Gomes, "what's the status of the Phase 2 weapon?" Gomes' eyes widened. "It's still powered up, Captain, but we haven't tested it on anything this powerful. We don't know if it will work." "Do we have a choice?" Sarah asked sharply. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'll line it up, but it'll take everything we've got." Sarah nodded, her resolve hardening. "Do it. We have one shot at this." The Vigilance shifted its course, moving toward the alien warship, aligning itself for the final strike. The human fleet, despite their failing weapons and energy reserves, formed up around their flagship, ready to follow Sarah's lead. Their hearts burned with a singular purpose. This was their last chance.